everyone, I'm Dr. Carolyn Willekes, and welcome to this episode of The Tale Behind, where I have managed to track down a most elusive creature, and that is the unicorn. Her horn is kind of hiding right now. She's being a little shy. There we go. Now, Angel here represents a very particular type of unicorn, one that we see a lot of within the Western tradition. She's a bit of a mashup between the pop culture My Little Pony and the unicorns of the Western European medieval world, which are incredibly symbolic and important. They're always white, they're small, they're often very horse-like or pony-like in their appearance, sometimes with a little bit of goat thrown in, and they're meant to represent purity and innocence and things along those lines. They're a really important symbol within the European Christian tradition. But they are not the only unicorns out there. They're part of a much bigger unicorn legacy that began over 2,500 years ago in what seems to be ancient Mesopotamia and possibly parts of India and Central Asia. So our first recorded account of the unicorn comes from about 2,500 years ago, the 4th century-ish, with the author Ctesias, and he's describing a type of unicorn that comes out of sort of India and Central Asia, which really just sounds like an Asiatic wild ass with a horn in the middle of its forehead. There are earlier artistic representations of unicorn creatures that come from Mesopotamia, and they take on the appearance of a bull. I mean, they are very much a bull, but with a single unicorn curved horn coming out of the middle of its forehead, rather than the 2 horns that bulls usually have. Later in the Persian tradition, you hear of an animal called the Carcadon, which seems to be some sort of mashup between an equine-type creature and a bit of a rhino. And it is known for 2 things. One, its horn can remove poison from water sources, which is something that the European unicorn does as well. But also, it likes to get into battles with elephants, and then it impales the elephant on its horn. The elephant dies, but then the unicorn dies, the Carcadon dies, because it can't get the elephant off of its horn. So there's obviously something symbolic going on there. Marco Polo, when he was on his travels, he describes finding a unicorn in what is Sumatra, and he's really disappointed because it looks nothing like this type of unicorn or any version of it whatsoever. He describes it as being very large and noisy and quite thick and heavy, and it's gray and it's got wrinkly skin and it wallows in the mud. He's describing a rhino, which obviously has unicorn aspects in the sense of a horn on its face, but is nothing like the unicorns Marco Polo was familiar with. We also hear of very important unicorns within the Chinese tradition, an animal called the Carolyn, which is considered one of the most auspicious animals in kind of the pantheon of Chinese mythological beasts. The Carolyn's appearance changes over time. It almost becomes kind of dragonish looking at some points in its sort of iconographic history. And it's a very lucky animal. A Carolyn port is a portent of good fortune in terms of signifying that someone is an extraordinary, benevolent, wise, compassionate, virtuous individual. So, for example, Confucius's mother is said to have seen a Carolyn before she gave birth to Confucius, who goes on to be one of the most important thinkers in human history. There's a similar animal in the Japanese tradition, the kirin, which has similar associations and sometimes a bit of a similar appearance as well. So what does all of this mean? I mean, we find these unicorn, whatever you might want to call them, these unicorn-type animals in all of these different cultural traditions over a long period of time. So it suggests that as a species, we have an odd fascination with the idea of a one-horned animal. I mean, we know 2-horned animals are probable. There's tons of them out there, all sorts of 2-horned species, but not a one-horned one. And so we fixate on this idea of creating a one-horned animal. And it brings us to something kind of really important about our ideas and our relationships with mythical beasts of the imagination, animals of the imagination. On the surface, it's really easy, especially if you think of yourself as a logical individual, to scoff at the idea of a unicorn. It's ridiculous, they're not real, no one's ever seen one, it's all our imagination, people are just making it up. People have gone so far as to actually try and create unicorns, single-horned animals. There was an individual back in the 1930s, I believe it was, Franklin Dove, and he took a bull calf, and basically from the time of its birth, he began manipulating its horns so that eventually they came together as one and they twisted into a single horn. And when this calf grew up, he looked remarkably like the bulls that you see, the unicorn bulls you see in the ancient Mesopotamian interpretations. But that aside from trying to physically create a unicorn, There's this believability about them, about all mythical beasts. Because when you look at a unicorn, or any other mythological animal, or monstrous animal, you can recognize what they're made of. In other words, you can identify all of the animals that make up that particular mythical beast. And this is what makes them believable. Because I can be like, oh, there's some horse in there, maybe some goat, and some sort of horned animal, whether it's a narwhal or some sort of ram or antelope or creature like that. Yeah, I can tell all of the animals that make up this one. And all of those animals are real. So why can't this animal be real as well? So mythical beasts like the unicorn, they don't just tell us things about cultural traditions and symbolism and iconography and things like that. They also tell us something about our own minds. Because admit it, as logical as you might be, as practical as you might be, there's always a little bit of your brain, a little part of your mind, that kind of wants the unicorn to be real, that wants them to be out in a glade, undisturbed, somewhere out there, living their best unicorn life. In other words, they tell us something about ourselves and the way that we view the world around us. Thanks for checking in, and take care.